The next leg of our trip was to take us to Bodh Gaya and then further east to Varanasi. Unfortunately, news had begun to filter through that there was civil unrest in the Haryana and Punjab area and that the road and rail links were being closed. Abby was monitoring the situation, which could mean that we would have to revise our itinerary after Varanasi. However, for today everything looked fine, so we're off to explore Bodh Gaya, which is the holiest site for Buddhists who come to pay homage from all over the world, and it is where Buddha first found enlightenment. The centrepiece is the Mahabodhi temple, which dominates the area and was our first stop before exploring the rest of the site. This gilded stone image of Buddha in the main sanctuary dates back to the 10th century and sits on a carved pedestal of lions and elephants. Back outside, we were free to wander and see the pilgrims from far and wide and take pictures without restriction. Many groups had their own little area and were taking part in numerous ceremonies. Abby also pointed out various locations where Buddha meditated during his enlightenment.
අපි දන්නේ අනගාരിക ධර්මපාලතුමා මේ තරම් දේශයක් මේ තරම් අපගේ ගෞරවනීය ස්වාමින් වහන්සේට අනුමෝදන් වේවා. අනුමෝදන් වීමෙන්
Although the pilgrims were predominantly Asian, Western visitors seemed welcome to join in if they wished. The drinking of tea was all part of the ritual, and some even brought their own flasks. As is the case with all religious worship in India, flowers were everywhere, although we could not see the reason for the coffee cups. Overall, the whole place was a totally uplifting experience. Our next stop was the Thai Temple, which is perhaps one of the most picturesque of the temples in the area, which is an international centre for Buddhism and has temples and monasteries from most parts of the world. This temple was only built in 1956 in an attempt to strengthen relations between India and Thailand. It is unique and is the only Thai temple in India. The huge bronze statue dominates the interior and creates an amazing sense of calm inside. Just down the road we stopped off at the great Buddha statue, which is 80 foot tall, and the first Buddha ever built in the history of India. It took 120,000 masons 7 years to complete and was blessed by the Dalai Lama when it was opened in 1989. Back at our hotel, we discovered that our train to Varanasi was delayed by at least 6 hours, and there was no firm promise of when it would arrive. So Abby took the decision to abandon the train and arrange a coach trip at very short notice. This decision resulted in one of the most nightmare journeys of our trip, although it was really interesting. What we did not know was that the road to Varanasi was in the process of being extended, and there was a huge volume of commercial traffic using the route. Vehicles of every shape and size were on the road, and there were frequent hold-ups and diversions. Added to this, constant blaring horns and non-existent lane discipline, and we had a recipe for disaster. Also, it was not uncommon to see traffic coming down the wrong side of the road and weaving in and out of the oncoming traffic. Absolutely suicidal. Having left at 3:45 PM, we finally arrived, exhausted, at our hotel at 2:45 AM. Having taken 11 hours, it was a journey definitely not to be repeated. Next morning, after a good sleep and an excellent breakfast, we were out on the coach and off to Sarnath Temple with the local guide. This temple is as sacred to Buddhists as Varanasi is to Hindus. It is here that Buddha came to the Deer Park to preach his first major sermon after gaining enlightenment. As always, we have to pass round the prayer wheels in a clockwise direction, the same way in which they are written, and also the same way as the sun moves across the sky. The Bodhi tree has great spiritual significance, the original being planted some 2,500 years ago. The present tree was planted in 1931 from a shoot brought from Sri Lanka. The modern Mulagandhaki Vihara marks a place where Buddha spent time in meditation and boasts of some beautiful murals. Our next stop was the Thai Buddha, which is India's largest standing statue of Lord Buddha. After a quick lunch, we found ourselves in the back streets of Varanasi, heading for a visit to a silk weaving factory. Here, in tiny workshops, the craftsmen weave gossamer fine threads into brocades, saris, scarves, and costume fabrics using techniques developed over many hundreds of years. The business flourished in the 16th century with the patronage of the Mughal emperors, when the weavers became adept at using gold and silver threads to create sumptuous brocades for royal costumes. After a while, we were ushered into a showroom for tea, then shown the huge range of fabrics which were on sale. Needless to say, the ladies soon had the credit cards out and were debating which scarves and fabrics they preferred. Eventually, choices were made and we found ourselves aboard a fleet of cycle rickshaws bound for the River Ganges and the famous Ghats, which stretch for 4 miles along the riverbank. There was a great deal of competition between the rickshaw boys as to who was to arrive first. Varanasi is India's holiest Hindu city, with religious links that go back nearly 3,000 years. Before we took to the water, we had time to explore some of the 90 or so ghats which line the river. Here the temples and shrines reverberate with the endless cycle of Hindu religious rituals, from the daily routine of prayer, bathing and also funeral pyres which cremate bodies wrapped in white that are bathed in the holy waters of the Ganges before final cremation. This evening we are taking a trip along the river to see more of the area. Abby gives us some background into the history of the Ghats and life by the river.
Varuna River and just down there, that river doesn't exist anymore, but Assi River. And there is a ghat also in the name of that river, Assi Ghat. So it's the confluence of two rivers, Varuna and Assi. That's how it got its name, Varanasi.
A little later we join the hundreds of boats which come to witness the ritual worship which takes place at dusk every day and is presided over by rows of priests who perform prayers and chants for the pilgrims who flock here from all over the world. Back on dry land, we find our rickshaws and make our way back to the hotel for a group meal. Next day, we're out at 6 a.m. for a short bus ride back to the Ganges and a boat trip to see the sunrise and the locals preparing for the day. Here, the people appear from the labyrinth of streets to wash clothes, perform yoga, make offerings, and take a ritual dip in the river. I don't think that our immune systems would be quite up to any of us taking to the highly contaminated waters. The whole area permeates a timeless atmosphere and a sense of calm in spite of the intense activity going on. And of course, commerce is never very far away. We turn back along the river and make our way towards the Manikarni Ghat, where the preparations for the day's funerals are underway. We keep a respectful distance in spite of our natural curiosity. Before leaving, we go on a whistle-stop tour of the back street, which is yet another eye-opener. After lunch, Abby took a few of us to see a Bollywood musical in the local mall. It was a lot of fun and easy to follow, even though we didn't speak the language. We then took our farewells from the hotel and made our way to the overnight train going to Agra. On the train, we had a low-level bunk and shared with a couple of older Indian men who had the top bunks. We had brought noodles from the hotel and washed them down with lassi. Lights were out by 9 p.m. and we both slept remarkably well. The train arrived about 1 hour late at 7:30 in the morning, and we went straight into breakfast and were able to have our room by 9 a.m.